العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. وبعد. Okay, my respected friends, I hope everyone is doing well tonight, inshallah. Just a humble request. Please, if you have young children, if they're making noise and whatnot, just please take them to the back. There's a section in the back, the area in the back is meant for them. So inshallah they can run around there and let off their energy out there. So, today's topic, it's a very important issue. It's an issue that many have become kind of desensitized to in our societies because of how much it's pushed and how much it's widely accepted in the places we live today. The whole issue of having a boyfriend or having a girlfriend and having a partner of the opposite gender. What does Islam, what does our deen say about this? And I'm sure many of us know that it's quite self-evident. It's impermissible, it's haram, we know. So I don't want to get into the details and evidences for why it's permissible. I'm going to touch upon a few evidences to show why it's impermissible and haram. But more importantly, our deen is so beautiful. Allah Azza wa Jal, when He prohibits something, He prohibits it because it's for the betterment of ourselves. Allah does not tell us to stay away from something arbitrarily. There's a reason why Allah says, this is haram, this is prohibited, stay away from it. And it's only for our benefit. So we're going to speak about the cause and the effect as well, my respected friends. When I was 8 or 9 years old, and I didn't understand it at that time. I remember I was in elementary school. A girl came knocking on my door at home. I was 8 or 9 years old. And my mom opened the door. I don't know if my mom's here. She was supposed to come, but... And I never forget what she said to this girl. She opened the door with her very heavy accent. She's like, Ali, not allowed talk to girl. I remember, because I was standing in the back and I was so embarrassed. 9 years old, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and I went to my mom. What are you doing? Like, she's like, no, bachin, you don't understand right now, this and that. But now, through life's experiences, through the things we have read, through the things we have seen, we see the hikmah and wisdom behind why our parents tell us to stay away from certain things. We'll jump right into it, inshallah. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in Surah Al-Bani Israel, or Surah Isra, verse number 32. He says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. Allah says, do not come close to zina. What is zina? Adultery, fornication, copulation, whatever you want to call it. Don't come close to zina because it is a very obscene and degenerate action. And what does Allah say after that? And this is what I want to talk about. Of how it's associated to having a boyfriend or a girlfriend or friend of the opposite gender. Allah says, وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. What a wretched path that is towards zina. And this is the part of focus. Allah is telling us here that zina, there is a path towards it. There's something that can lead you towards it. What is that path, my respected friends? Environments that are conducive to zina. The people you are hanging out with that are attributed and associated with zina. So the things we are surrounded by that are associated with zina, these are all things that lead towards zina. And the Prophet ﷺ, he further highlights this when he says, alayhi salatu wassalam, al-udhunu tazni wa zinaha as-sam. And we're going to get to the second part of the hadith later on. The Prophet ﷺ, he says that the ears can also commit zina. The ears can also commit zina. And the zina of the ears is what? As-sama. Listening and hearing to things that are degenerate and obscene. What's an example of that, my respected friends? The music today, the degenerate garbage music that's being played today. What are these individuals talking about in their songs? It's all about sleeping around. It's all about materialistic gains. It's all about scum. It's all about drugs, alcohol, this and that, this and that. These are all things that are conducive to zina of the ears. Because when we listen to something, we have to remember that the heart is the vessel of purity, but the ear is something that leads towards the heart. The ear is one of the doors of the heart. So when we listen to things that are haram, do we not think that our hearts are not getting affected? Of course it is. No doubt it is. And a lot more things are getting affected, my respected friends. So, we have the whole notion of major zina and minor zina. The major zina is obviously zina itself. And the minor zina is the example we mentioned of the ears and listening to things that can give the individual the thoughts of zina. And why is this associated with having a boyfriend or girlfriend? What's the mentality today? What's the notion today? A boyfriend and girlfriend, they get together, what do? Everything they do, every step they take, it's leading towards that destination of zina. What else is going to come out of it? The only reason two individuals get together in the societies we live in, due to attraction and due to whatever it is, it's zina. And my respected friends, I want to make something very clear. It's impossible for a man and a woman to be friends without one of them catching feelings. Trust me when I say this. It's impossible for a man and a woman to be friends and to hang out and to socialize and to do this and to do that without one of them or both of them catching feelings for one another. This is not just the rhetoric of Islam. This is the rhetoric of modern psychology as well. We're going to touch upon a topic later on at the end, inshallah. But to just merely have a friend, it's impossible. Why? The Prophet ﷺ, what does he say, alayhi wassalatu wassalam? He says, لا يخلون رجل بامرأة إلا ثالثها الشيطان. A man and a woman, they are never together in khalwa, in seclusion, except that the third individual or the third shakhs will always be Iblis and Satan himself whispering things into those people's ears. So when a man and a woman are hanging out, Iblis is there. Iblis is trying to do his damage. Iblis is trying to take it to the next base, as they say. Iblis is trying to get them to do more and more and more. And no one is immune to that. No one is immune to that. The hadith is aam in general for everyone. We have the famous hadith. It's a weak hadith, but the meaning is strong. The ulama have written. The hadith itself, because of its chain, it's weak. But the meaning of this hadith is wrong. What does he say? Alayhi salatu wassalam, النساء حبائل الشيطان وبالعكس الرجال حبائل النساء. The Prophet ﷺ, what does he say? One of the most powerful ropes and tools of Iblis, of shaitan, is what? To use the opposite gender against you. This is based on the verse of the Quran where Allah says, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ. Allah says that this world has been made beautiful for you. The love of desires has been made very appealing for you. What's the first thing Allah mentions? An-nisa, the opposite gender. That's the carnal desire that every single one of us have been created within our nafs. No one is immune to it. And we hear this sentiment sometimes, that, no, I don't think like that, or... No. It's either they're lying to themselves, or they're not normal. This is basic human biology and psychology. And yes, there are anomalies. There are rare instances and cases. But you cannot make a hukum based on one case or two cases. Allah gives hukum and rulings based on the majority. And this is the majority rule, my respected friends. He continues, alayhi salatu wassalam. We'll touch upon the other hadith. But how is it such that, it's the societies we live in? Again, I'm not saying everyone is like this. But society is trying to indoctrinate people to think like this. When individuals dress up, for example. When a man is going out, he's dressing up. He's trying to flex. He's trying to, whatever. Show what he's wearing or show what he's driving. Who is it for mainly? He's trying to attract the opposite gender. That's what society is trying to push down our throats. Al-bil'aks. When women go out trying to beautify themselves, adorn themselves, what are they trying to do? What's society trying to get them to think? That, hey, I gotta garner attention. I gotta get people to look at me. I gotta get people to think about me. And these are all steps towards that seed of zina and thinking about zina, which we will touch on up ahead. So khalwa. What is khalwa? The Prophet ﷺ says, La yakhluna. Do not be alone with the opposite gender. Khalwa, literally, it's translated to seclusion. One cannot be alone with the opposite gender. Now, a question arises. What if you're at a coffee shop socializing with the opposite gender? Or what if you're going to the movies or your friend circles, it's mixed men and women? Does this fall under khalwa? Yes, it does. It does fall under khalwa. Because what is the condition that the Prophet ﷺ mentions after? إِلَّا مَعَهَا ذَا مَحْرَمٍ. إِلَّا مَعَهَا ذَا مَحْرَمٍ. The woman should always have a mahram with her if the third individual is a non-mahram man. So when we're going out in our friend circles, university circles, whatever it is, and we're hanging out, going to the movies, this and that, is there any supervision there? No. Can we do and say whatever we want? Basically, can one thing lead to another? And look, this is not me just talking. For those of you who are born and raised here and who have a bit of life experience, and you're not young and delusional, trust me when I say that one thing does lead to another. And there's an infinite amount of cases, my respected friends, of even you chilling with a whole bunch of guys and girls, feelings are caught, and then from chilling in that group of circle, you start chilling by yourself with them somewhere else. It leads to that. It leads to that. That's the reality. It's not going to lead to them getting further away from one another. No. Attraction, it's a ilaqa. It's a connection. A connection that is very hard to be broken. Love and lust is something very powerful, my respected friends. Lust and love are very powerful. You know, there was another message I wanted to talk about, but if I have time at the end, I'll talk about that. Of what's this whole thing of mahram and why do women need maharim? We'll touch on that at the end, inshallah. If we have time. Allah Azza wa Jalla in Surah Al-Nur, He makes two other injunctions. And this is where we say that the cause is really showing the effect of why something is haram. Allah says in Surah Al-Nur, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. And in the next verse, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ. Allah is commanding both men and women to control their gaze, to lower their gaze. And right after that He says they should also protect their private parts. They should protect their appendages. Astonishing. Why? From lowering your gaze, connecting it to protecting your private parts. Why? Because the first step and the most powerful tool Iblis uses is to make sure our eyesight is uncontrolled. That's that first hadith we touched on. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, Al-aynu tazni wa zinaha an-nadhr. The eyes can also commit adultery. And the adultery of the eyes is to look at something haram. And now this is where we're going to talk about the effect, and it just shows how wise Allah Azza wa Jalla is and how kareem Allah is. Allah is not telling us, again, something random to stay away from. There's a reason why He's telling us to do so. You have ulama, Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi in his tafsir, he would say, An-nadru sihamu sammin ila al-qalb. Looking at something haram, it's like a poisonous arrow that is being shot inside your heart. And as we know, what does poison do? When poison goes into the body, it enters from one area and it spreads. The effects are not immediate. The damage is not immediate. It's a slow, painful, grueling type of sickness which eventually leads to death unless it's treated. So Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi is comparing it to poison that goes right inside the heart. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he would tell Ali, he would say, Ya Ali, la tattabi' al-nadra al-nadra. Do not follow your first glance with a second glance. Yani at times we're going to look at something haram by accident. We may see someone, we might look at something by accident, we must immediately look away. Ali radiallahu anhu has a very beautiful poem about this. He has a very beautiful poem about this. He would say, أقول لعيني احبس اللحظات ولا تنظري يا عين بالسرقات فكم نظرة إلى القلب شهوة فأصبح منها القلب في حسرات. Ali radiallahu anhu, he would say, I always speak to my eyes. I will tell my eyes, oh eyes, do not try to steal any glances of anyone. Don't try to steal a glance from anyone. Yani don't do theft of sight. When we look at something haram, that's a type of theft. We're not supposed to look at them, yet we're still doing it. But you see what he would do? He would speak to himself. He would advise himself. He would train himself. And he would continue, he would say, how many glances have pushed the heart towards desire? And how many glances have destroyed human beings and brought them towards severe depression, grief, and sorrow? And this is where we come to the case, my respected friend, of the famous stories. Layla, Majnoon, Romeo, Juliet, these stories. If you really look into these stories, they're real stories. They're not, fake. They're not fictional. They're real. You look into the story of Layla and Majnoon. I was curious. Last year, I was just curious about the story of who was Majnoon and who was Layla. What was their story? How did they meet? What happened and what transpired? It all began with a what? With a glance. Majnoon, his real name is not Majnoon. His real name is Qais. Majnoon means someone who's crazy and someone who's lost it. He lost himself due to the love he had for Layla. Went whack, he went crazy. But the story goes that one day, Layla, her father was a farmer, very wealthy farmer. She was in the fields taking care of everything, and Majnoon came, and Majnoon just started to look at her non-stop. And through those glances and through that sight, Majnoon became infatuated. Majnoon became infatuated to a degree where he completely lost himself. So there is reality to this, and there is actual scientific and psychological evidence for this as well. There's one more story I wanted to touch on. Not a story, but this notion of looking at something haram where it could lead to a person's insanity. It's spread out throughout Persian, Arab tradition, across the board. You have Mawlana rahmatullahi alayhi. This is the second dastan in his Mathnawi. It's the second story in his Mathnawi where he talks about a king. There was a king who fell completely in love with a slave girl. There was a slave girl sitting down by a tree, and this king who had all the money, all the wealth, everything, went crazy in love just by looking at her. Lost it. What did he say? He says, Ya kanizak deed shah bar shah ra, shud ghulami on kanizak jan shah. He starts the poem, he said there was a king who saw a slave girl, and when he looked at her, he became a slave of that slave girl because of the love he had. He lost it. The story goes, it's a very long story, we're not going to get into the details, but he says something quite interesting that shows his insanity. He says, Shah tabiban jam kard az chap و راست گفت جان هر دو در دست شماست. He says this is the king gathered all of the doctors because this slave girl, she became very sick, and the king said, look, this slave girl, her cure is also my cure. Because she's sick, I'm sick, and if you don't cure her, I'm also going to die as well. The point is, he lost himself. Why? Because of that glance, my respected friends. Because of that glance. MashaAllah. So when we go up with the opposite gender, are we not looking at them? Are we not looking at them? Of course we're looking at them. We're looking dead right center into their eyes, and that is dangerous. That is very dangerous. You know, this is where I wanted to touch upon the neurological study I was reading a few months ago. There was a study done, and there's articles all over the internet about this, okay? Articles all over the internet, where these individuals, they write that the longer two individuals look at each other, or the longer two individuals look into one another's eyes, the more two chemicals are being excreted from the brain. I'll mention that again. When a man and a woman, when two individuals, or one individual who finds the other attractive, continuously looks at the other individual of attraction, there are two chemicals that the brain releases. Oxytocin, and the second one is quite difficult to pronounce, phenylethylamine. Okay, these are two chemicals that are basically in charge of human affection, human bonding, love. They're known as the love drugs of the brain. So some studies show that if you look at a person for 6 minutes or more, you're going to be completely infatuated with them. I'm not telling anyone to try this. But the point is, going back to the wisdom of why Allah tells us to lower our gaze. Allah tells us to lower our gaze so we don't lose ourselves. He's not telling us, oh, don't look at this, it's haram, let's say look away. No, because if we do look at it, we will lose ourselves. This is why the injunction of lowering the gaze came. There's hikmah behind it. Allah is Kareem. Allah is very, 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 very Kareem. So there's a question I wanted to pose to you all, and this is something that I was reading. It's based on hadith, and it's also based on some of the works of ulama. Some are speculative, Allah knows best. When a person dies, where is the first point that the soul exits the body? It's a question. Say again? I can't hear you, sir. From the toes, exactly. This is why, I don't know if anyone has seen a person passing away or about to pass away. If you notice that their toes are blue. Their toes get bruised. If you've noticed this, when a person passes, or even after they pass away, their toes are blue. Some of the ulama, they write the reason why the toes are blue is because that's the area that Malakul Maut rips the soul from. And because of that force and pressure, that area gets bruised. So now, when Malakul Maut rips the soul out of this area, so the soul is getting taken out of our body, from our feet, and it's slowly coming up and up and up. Where is the point of exit? The nose? Some ulama, some narrations indicate that it's the collarbone. Other narrations indicate that it's the nose and the eyes. Okay? So our soul gets ripped out, slowly, and it's taken out from this area right here. So now the question arises, when Allah Azza wa Jalla created us, where was the point of entry for our souls? From this area. There's no hadith for it, but some other ulama, based on the hadith of where the souls are ripped out of, they say it's this area as well. You have the likes of Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, and Imam al-Juwayni rahimahullah ta'ala. They would say that whenever you look into a person's eyes, you're not just deeply looking at them, you are looking at the doors of entry of that person's soul. This is why looking into one's eyes are very powerful. It's not something just an ordinary limb. We mentioned about some of the gateways of the heart. The strongest gateway, Al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi writes, is the eyes. So whenever we look at something, the heart immediately processes it. And as we know, the heart and the ruh, they're linked. So these are not things that are random. There's a reason behind it. Do you see the injunction of why Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us now to lower our gazes? But do you see now why, even more so, to have a friend of the opposite gender is even more prohibited? It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. So there was a study done. You know, in today's day and age, people always talk about the whole concept of body count and how many people you've been with. It's degeneracy. Absolute degeneracy. But what does this lead to? One of the signs of Yawm al-Qiyamah is the increase and influx of zina. We know this. We know this. This is one of the signs of Qiyamah. But one thing we've seen today, an interesting phenomenon, that divorce has also increased. Divorce has also increased. That is directly linked to the increase of zina. There's an institution in Quebec City. They wrote the Vanier Institute of Family Law or Family Society or whatever. They focus on sociological issues pertaining to the betterment of families. What's conducive to a strong family? And these are non-Muslims. They did a study to look into some of the major factors of divorce in Canada and what types of people are involved in divorce in Canada. Their studies showed that individuals who had the most partners, i.e. boyfriends and girlfriends, before marriage, their likelihood to divorce was a lot higher. Their likelihood to divorce was much higher. Why? Because they have become desensitized to the sanctity of that relationship. There's a hurma and a sanctity between the relationship of a man and a woman. This is why it's called aqdun nikah. And nikah, we translate it as marriage, but it's not just a marriage, it's a contract of sanctity. It's a contract. You understand? So, the more... Hello, how are you? So the more partners we have, okay? I want you to listen very carefully to this. The more partners we have before marriage, the more the sanctity of our future marriage will be on jeopardy. It will be jeopardized. Why? Because these things that happen between a man and a woman, and we're going to talk about some straight examples. I'm sorry if anyone's too young, but these are realities. I mean, the societies we live in today, they're trying to introduce this stuff at a much younger age, but these are realities. Every time you hug someone of the opposite gender, every time you hold the hand of someone of the opposite gender, anything more than that, these are all things and these are all ingredients that would have made your marriage much sweeter. These are all ingredients. Hugging the opposite gender, touching the opposite gender, whatever it is, these are all ingredients that's supposed to solidify the love of your future marriage. But when we're doing these things before marriage, we become desensitized to it, such that when we get married, it's all old for us. It's nothing special for us. Marriage is supposed to be something very special, something very sweet. But because of the degeneracy of society, marriage has lost its sweetness. These are things that are supposed to be saved for one's marriage, my respected friends. Because again, these are all things that solidify a marriage and make a marriage much stronger. But when a person has already done all that multiple times in the past, it's nothing new. And they look at that marriage like a previous relationship. They think they can walk away from it whenever they want. And look, talaq, divorce, it's not haram. It's not haram. When the conditions are there and when it's justified, it's permissible. In some cases, it's wajib. But this does not mean we jump into every relationship because of our desensitized, degenerate self, walk away for the most, minimal of reasons. Cohabitation, this is the word. Cohabitation has led to an influx of divorce. And what is cohabitation? Having a boyfriend or a girlfriend or multiple before marriage. Now this doesn't mean, I'm not trying to scare people, because everyone makes mistakes. Right? We live in a day and age where everyone makes errors and faults. No one's perfect. If a person makes tawbah, it's such and it's possible that Allah Azza wa Jal can remove that filth that came from when they had their boyfriend and girlfriends. Allah can do that. We have many cases and stories and examples of that, where individuals, they were dirtbags at one point. They were dirt at one point, but because of them changing their life and their tawbah, Allah Azza wa Jal gave them that halawa and sweetness of marriage. There's always hope. There's always hope. Another mas'ala, and I'm going to end off on this. We always talk about why we don't feel the sweetness of ibadah. We read stories about the scholars of the past and how ibadah was just their sanctuary. They felt so much sweetness every time they put their forehead to the ground, every time they did ibadah, dua. They just had this love, and one of the causes for people not having that anymore, and one of the reasons for why this has decreased, is because our gazes are not controlled. The Prophet ﷺ says this in a Sahih hadith. He says, مَا مِنْ مُسْلِمٍ يَنْظُرُ إِلَىٰ مَحَاسِنِ امْرَأَةٍ ثُمَّ يَغُضُّ بَصَرَهُ إِلَّا أَخْلَفَ اللَّهُ لَهُ عِبَادَةً يَجِدُ حَلَاوَتَهَا. There's not a single individual who looks at the opposite gender and notices the opposite gender's beauty, or they're attracted to them. When they look away, Allah Azza wa Jal will place a sweetness in that person's ibadah. These are one of the effects of staying away from things that are haram with our eyes. Our ibadah becomes sweeter. But look at today, social media, TikTok, Instagram, people are scrolling and there's no attention to what we're looking at. My friends, my young friends especially, and even some of our elders, we have elders now who have TikTok. It's quite just scrolling. But these are things that are not haram in and of themselves. But it can lead to one's destruction. It can lead to negative impacts and negative effects. So be very cautious of what we look at. Every glance is a type of theft. And we don't want Allah Azza wa Jalla to ask us all of those times we glanced at someone and we stole a glance from them. There was another message I wanted to talk about. It's not really pertaining to this. But inshallah, how much time do I have? 5 minutes? With Q&A or not?
No. Q&A we have 10 minutes after.
Okay, amazing. I want to touch on one more mas'ala. We have sometimes in our culture the whole notion of being engaged or a laughs, and then what's it called? The two individuals, the man and the woman, after their engagement, they act like they're married. Okay? They get engaged, and now everyone thinks that the two individuals think they're married, and they go out and they hold hands and they hug, and wallahu a'lam. My respected friends, they're not married. An engagement is not a marriage. A marriage is a nikah. This is the only thing that makes that union and relationship halal. Nothing else makes it halal. To go and speak to the opposite gender with a mahram, that's different. Right? That's different. We're allowed to do that if a mahram is present. But to now be engaged and think you can physically touch one another, this is haram. Qata'an haram. So we gotta really, some of the cultural aspects, culture is amazing. There's aspects of culture that are beautiful, no doubt. But there are some aspects that it conflicts with our deen. It conflicts with our deen. And sometimes it's not our elders' fault. Sometimes our elders, that's what they did back home. Maybe they don't know. But for my young friends who are on the verge, or inshallah ta'ala, one day they want to get married, or they're going to get married, be firm in your ceremonies and how you do it. Make it halal from the get-go. Make it halal from the get-go. Get your nikah done. Because you don't want to fall into sin thinking that it's all fine and it's all good, when in reality it's not. So now I hope it's clear. Again, we could have went into every, but when I say there was at least 40 hadith where the Prophet ﷺ forbid men and women to hang out, I'm not exaggerating. I don't want to go into 40 hadith. This is not a dars of hadith. This is something very informal. I want it to be just straight with every single one of you. I hope we now understand the reality and the hukum of this mas'ala, of having a boyfriend and girlfriend. It's haram. We should not think about it. Yeah, society does a lot of things. Society is pushing a lot of things down our throat. But just because society is pushing it down our throat, does it mean it's right? Of course not. Don't be a sheep. Our teachers would always tell us, be a shepherd. Be different. If everyone is doing one thing, if everyone's going around trying to get with the opposite gender, you stand out by being different, Allah will honor you through that. Allah will honor you through that. The people around you will respect you through that. The people around you will look at you as a person who has control of their desires. But if we just go with the flow of society, we're just going to be another pawn on the chessboard. We're just going to be another checker out there. But stand out by being different, by being proud of your deen, by not being a scumbag, by not being a degenerate. Because not only is it protecting us from the laqab and the trait and the name of being a degenerate, it's also protecting our future unions, our future relationships, and our future marriages. So it's a plus for us. So may Allah Azza wa Jal grant us all istiqamah and strength. May Allah Azza wa Jal keep us all away from haram. May Allah Azza wa Jal keep every single one of us away from shar. May Allah Azza wa Jal solidify and place love between every single individual who's married here with the respected spouse, and whoever is not married, may Allah Azza wa Jal grant them a spouse that fulfills those conditions and vice versa. Barakallahu feekum. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Now I think there's a Q&A.